Welcome one and all to another episode of Lens of Truth, a series breaking down all things Ocarina of Time. We'll be taking a detailed look at the story, dungeons, towns, mini-games, game mechanics, and way more that Ocarina of Time has to offer, so if you're interested to see more after this video concludes, do consider subscribing to stay tuned. On our last episode, we covered the wonderful introductory Kokiri Forest. In today's episode, we'll be taking a close look at the dungeon within the Great Deku Tree through the Lens of Truth. So the Great Deku Tree left his gargantuan maw open for us to wander inside of and rid him of a curse that's befallen him. What an interesting first task of the game. Stepping in, we're greeted with a room that is large vertically, but pretty small horizontally. At least, small enough that we can see every corner of the room from the floor we stand on pretty easily. Our goal from here is to climb upward. Notable things about this first floor though are these Deku Babas that will actually attack back this time. Using our shield and the fact that these enemies can't hit you any further than they can stretch from where they're planted, we're able to take these fights at our own pace. We've done our experimenting with our sword and shield, but now it's time to put it all to the test. Once we're through with these plants though, there's only one more point of interest on this ground floor: the spider's web. Despite how much we swing our blade or jump onto this spider web, there's no way to get through it for now, even though Navi tells us that we can see more dungeon beneath it. No big deal, we'll come back to it after we explore for a while. From here we can climb this ladder, or have Navi explain to us that we're also able to climb these thick vines covering the walls. Once we have, we run into yet another vine-covered wall, but this time there are enemy Skullwalchullas? That's what these guys are called. Skullwalchulla. Anyway, there are some enemies cleverly stopping us from reaching the next floor up here. At the foot of this wall lies a chest, and once we open it, we'll be rewarded with our first dungeon map. These are handy for keeping track of the rooms we've been to and the rooms we haven't. These will be handy to find with every single dungeon we stumble across during our playthrough. Without another direction we're able to go, we continue around the inside walls of the Great Deku Tree through a door with a curious Deku scrub inside of it. If your instinct around enemies isn't already to hold your shield up, talking to Navi about the Deku scrubs will reveal that your goal is to bounce their shots back at them. And what better way to do that than by bouncing the nuts that shoot at you off your shield. After hitting them, we just need to get close enough to them in order to talk them out of their panic. This Deku scrub in particular tells us about how jumping off of high ledges will cause us fall damage, but that we can keep holding forward to get a landing roll to avoid the hurt it would usually cause. This only works with heights up to a certain point, but it's definitely useful knowledge. Moving forward through this room, we see a chest up ahead. We jump onto this floating stone platform as it begins to shake violently, and then we jump the gap to the chest. Searching the chest will reward us with a very useful C button item in the form of our slingshot. This weapon can be fired at range and has an amount of ammo we'll need to keep refilled if we plan to keep using it. From here, since the stone platform gave way earlier, we have no easy way to get out of this room. We can't jump the distance and there are no vines to just climb up. But if you're paying enough attention, looking towards the door from the top of this cliffside with the chest, you'll notice Navi flying out towards this webbed up ladder on the other side. Of course, if we hit this ladder with our slingshot, we'll knock it loose, allowing us to escape the room we've been trapped in. As we're now heading back from a dead end with a new weapon capable of defeating enemies at range, we should probably go back to that wall of vines we weren't able to climb earlier. With a couple well-aimed shots, we're able to clear the wall and climb to the floor above. There are a couple of Skullchullas on this floor that are pretty easy to figure out how to fight properly, as well as a single door to wander through. In the room beyond this door, there's a few enemies, a couple platforms that can be raised by stepping on this button, and a big chest at the end that rewards us with our first compass. Finding one of these in any given dungeon will reveal where the chests are located. The compass will also show you where you are in the minimap of the room you're in with this yellow arrow, as well as where you entered this room from with a red arrow. The dungeon map and the compass will be your best friends in any given dungeon in this game, and now you've properly been introduced to both. With this compass, we're able to see that there's another chest in this very room, and while it's easy to get to, it only rewards us with a single heart. It does, however, lead us to our very first gold Skullchula. The gold Skullchullas will leave behind an emblem once killed that we can collect for later use in the game. For now, they're basically just optional collectibles, so try to find as many as you can. To leave this room, you'll need to do some thinking. So far, we'll only have found Deku sticks, Deku nuts, and a slingshot in terms of items, and with this door having locked itself behind us, we'll need to use one of them in order to escape and finish this dungeon. If we talk to Navi about this unlit torch sitting in the room, she'll tell us that it seems to have been burning not too long ago. With a bit of experimenting, it's not too hard to find out that that you're able to light these Deku sticks on fire and transfer that fire from one torch to the next, opening the door behind us. This torch section is a little less straightforward for new players than most of the game has been up to this point, similar to the ladder we needed to slingshot down from the wall, but this is all setting up the player to know exactly what kind of thinking they'll need to be doing throughout the entirety of this game. I actually think the game sets this up quite nicely and in a natural way for new players to understand, even if they've never played a game like this before. From here, there is no higher to climb within the lobby of the Great Deku Tree's innards, and after killing all the Skulltulas, there's really only one direction the camera points us towards, and especially given the fact that one of the ledges from the top floor has a heart floating just far enough off of it that we'll have to jump to collect it, that's exactly what we do. From this height, we're able to crash through the spiderweb we saw on the floor from the start of the dungeon, and we've officially entered the basement to the Deku Tree. From here, we have the side of the dungeon that'll be less about finding new items and more about figuring out how to move forward. For example, this button left in the open just waiting to be pressed will light a torch on fire once we step on it and burn away a spiderweb. Using the stick burning technique we used earlier, we're able to clear this door of its spiderwebs and move forward. In this room, we find another Deku Scrub, and once we hit his nut back to him, he reveals something of a secret code to us, and you're probably gonna want to write this down. It will be on the test later. His brothers up ahead can only be defeated if you hit them all in the correct order, 2, 3, 1. 23 is number 1, I suppose. With that knowledge in mind, we continue forward. Or at least we would if not for the door ahead being barred off again. Just like before though, we're meant to try out our different items, and given that there is one painfully obvious object in the room we've never seen before, it's gotta have something to do with that. Using our slingshot to shoot the eye on the wall, our path has been cleared. This next room isn't meant to be crossed. There's a big spiky bar keeping us from riding this platform over the water, and we can't just swim to the other side either. Well, as soon as we walk in here, Navi tells us how to make use of diving underwater while we swim, and with that, we're able to hit this button, lower the water level, and ride the platform underneath the spikes above. The rest of this room is pretty simple. We just have to kill this Skulltula and learn about pushing blocks. Moving forward, we have a pretty simple torch lighting room, leading us to a brand new enemy to fight. In this room, it's pretty clear that we'll need to burn some spider webs in order to move forward, but as soon as we step into this inner circle of the room, these enemies fall from the ceiling and hatch from their eggs. They're pretty simple to take out, only requiring one hit to the eye, a little chase as they run away, and one more swing to the eye to be killed. But there are 3 of them, and they're able to do a charging attack, which, while being pretty simple to dodge, can make these guys a little trickier than any enemies we've faced so far. After they're all dealt with though, it's as simple as moving forward through the crawl space one of these webs was hiding from us. Beyond this crawl space is the room that we first fell into when entering the basement of the dungeon. Having come full circle, but now standing on the higher ground we were unable to reach the first time around, all we have to do is simply push this block off the ledge, and we've made this higher floor accessible from the lower one. Now all that's left to figure out is how to get rid of this web on the floor. The first time we had a web on the floor like this, we broke through it by simply jumping from a high place, but there's no real height to be gained in this room underground, so that's out of the question. But there is one other way that we've been getting rid of webs throughout this entire dungeon, by burning them. With this new shortcut we opened up by pushing this block, we've gained the ability to bring fire from this torch we used earlier to this web on the floor we can burn by swinging our stick. Bada bing bada boom, we've punched a new hole in the floor and we can travel deeper into the underground of the Great Deku Tree. In the last room of this dungeon, we are faced with one final test. Did you write down that thing that I mentioned earlier? Dude, come on, I literally told you it would be on the test. This is the test that you needed that for. What do you think, just because this is a YouTube video you don't need to keep track of this stuff on your own? You thought good old Myloe was gonna have this all figured out and that you didn't have to do any of the heavy lifting yourself. Well, you'd be right. Here we need to defeat the Deku Scrubs in the order that the other Deku Scrub told us about earlier. 23 is number 1 after all, and once we defeat them in this order, they decide to give us a hint that will help us in the room ahead. It doesn't seem like this guy wanted to tell us, but somehow defeating these 3 in that order forces him to do it? I don't know, but what he tells us is this. In order to administer the coup de grace to Queen Goma, strike with your sword while she is stunned. This tip isn't the most helpful thing in the world for the boss that we're about to face, because if a boss gets stunned, of course that's the window we're going to try to use to get our damage in. But I guess it does tell us there's a way to stun them in the first place, which is nice. Moving into the next room, the door shuts behind us. It's dark. It's foggy. It's quiet. Nothing but the shuffling around of a mysterious creature can be heard throughout the room. With a little bit of falling dirt from the ceiling landing near us, we take a look up to the ceiling and sure enough, we find Queen Gohma. This boss is pretty easy. Talking to Navi about it will reveal that the eye is only vulnerable when it's red, and after trying to slash it while it's red a few times, we need to resort to something else. Slingshotting Queen Gohma's eye, just like the eye that we hit in the room earlier in this dungeon, will leave her stunned on the ground. This is of course our window to get some damage through to her like the Deku Scrub told us. After taking a good number of hits, Queen Gohma climbs back up to the ceiling and starts to drop more of the Gohma larvas for us to fight. Once we've defeated them all, Gohma comes back down for round 2, but we already know the key to taking her down. Slingshot to the eye first, and then our sword. Gohma goes down pretty easily in just 2 stun cycles. After her defeat, we're shown a glowing blue circle and a large heart standing in front of us. This heart is what's known as a heart container, rewarding us 1 extra heart worth of health permanently moving forward, and the glowing blue circle is the portal that will take us out of the Great Deku Tree where we can tell him that we've dispelled the curse. This is where we'll pick up in my next Lens of Truth video, so stay tuned for that. The Great Deku Tree is a perfect first dungeon in my opinion. There are still a few things to learn about playing this game that are told to you every time you come across them, and there are also plenty of places where what you're supposed to do is never told to you directly. This dungeon serves as an extension to the tutorial that Kokiri Forest already is, but it also gives you freedom to mess around and figure out things yourself, giving the satisfaction of a job well done. Nothing in this dungeon is very hard to figure out, given the fact that you only have a couple items to mess around with in your pockets. Despite that, it still feels satisfying to get into the groove of this game, like figuring out that you can light your stick on fire to interact with the world that you're in, or finding out that eyeballs are prime targets for being shot whenever you get the chance. Kokiri Forest and the Great Deku Tree are all the setup you should need in order to move forward and enjoy all that this game has to offer you throughout your adventure. From here on out, it's up to you to solve the puzzles, complete the dungeons, and progress the story forward. If you like videos like this, consider subscribing to my channel, as Lens of Truth is an ongoing series I intend to continue until Ocarina of Time has nothing left for me to cover. If you'd like to check out the episode I put out last week covering the clever design of Kokiri Forest tutorial, that'll be on screen now, along with one of my other videos recommended specifically for you to watch. Until next Friday, that's my time. My name's Myloe, and I'm out.